This is an interview by Roland Matthies for the use of Oakwood Village and perhaps the Heritage Center to understand the beginnings of Oakwood Village, Oakwood Retirement Village here in Springfield. I have Gary with me today with the idea of exploring the very beginning of how the plans got off the paper and into construction. He's going to be devious, he says, because of memory problems, but who isn't these days? So Gary Williams, excuse me, your background a little bit, how you got interested in doing this job, and then how in the world did you do it? How did you get it done?
Well, again, my background was I worked with International Harvester for maybe 10, 11 years, something like that. And I had gone to Connecticut and came back, and I worked for a guy here in Springfield. His name was Bob Peelsticker with International Harvester Company. And Bob had gone over to C.E. Bauer and was working there as a vice president, and they needed somebody to deal with union relations over there, so he called and asked if I would come over there. I did that for a while, and then they started talking about me moving to Connecticut to a plant, and our family just wasn't ready. We ended up with 7 children, so I wasn't ready to start relocating again. So I had an opportunity to go to Mercy Medical Center as their vice president of human resources, and I did that. Worked for Jack Cashin there. Yeah.
Yeah, he's back memory.
Yeah, I bet. Worked for Jack in human resources and enjoyed that. I was over there for a while. And finally ended up then, I took a job as the director of the alcohol and drug treatment program here in town. And there was a fellow by the name of Andy Turner who had gone to St. John Center as they were just building it. And he was their first administrator. And maybe I was running the Alcohol and Drug Council for maybe 4 or 5 years, and then Andy decided he was going to take another job and leave town. So I got the opportunity to go over there and talk with Virginia Durfee and talk with Pastor Kay Glazner, and they gave me the opportunity to come to St. John Center as the administrator.
What year was that?
I think that was around 1980, I think. Give or take, right in around 1980. And one of the things I had to do was get an administrator's license. And in order to do that, you have to go serve what they call an internship. So I ended up at Otterbein Home down in Lebanon, Ohio, and did an internship under a fellow by the name of Charlie Gilgard, who'd been involved in the retirement community business and nursing home business for 92 years or something like that. And just a real great teacher and a guy that I learned a lot from. But I think probably what I picked up was what they had done with the retirement community. And I just loved the concept that they put together. And they had a nursing home, and they had some assisted living type situations, and they had a lot of independent living. They had cottages, and they had congregate type like we have here at Oakwood Village. So when I came back after that was over, I guess I had in my mind that we need one of these here in Springfield. And Pastor Kay and I started talking about it. And the more we talked about it, the more excited we got. Of course, you don't bring up an idea to him. You better be prepared, because he's going to start pushing it. And so he did. And he was really, we really started putting a lot of plans together. And we hired somebody out of St. Louis. Frankly, I don't remember their name. It was a firm out there who came in and did a market feasibility study to see if there was a market in Springfield, Ohio for what we were going to build. And frankly, they said, oh, this is going to be like falling off a log. You're just going to build this and everybody's going to come. So one of the things that as we started putting the plans together, it was really probably a little bigger financial proposition than what we could handle. And
were you a member of that congregation?
No, I wasn't. I wasn't. But we had set up a separate corporation, and so as we started having the challenges and wondering whether we could really pull it off and pay the high interest rates that were going on at that time, Mercy Medical Center approached us and said, would you guys have an interest in becoming part of the Mercy system? We said, well, we don't know. And they said, well, one of the nice things about this is that we've got a great big bond issue. And we could get this, and you could get an interest rate like 4.5%.
Yeah.
And so that was very attractive for everybody. It was a kind of a trade-off, and we could get this deal accomplished and become part of the Mercy system. And it was difficult for everybody to make that decision. But finally, the board did. And we had a great board of directors and board of trustees at that time at St. John's Center. And they had a planning committee. And the planning committee sort of broke off and became the board for building Oakwood Village. And then at some later time, we had a board for St. John's Center and a board for Oakwood Village. And then they set up a board that would be an overseer of both of them, almost an umbrella corporation called St. John's Mercy. But we went through a lot of trials and trying to make sure that this thing was going to work. And we had an architect. The architect that we hired was from St. Louis, from the same firm, and they put the plans together for us. We had a lot of input into what it was going to be.
Were you already on salary?
Yes, I was. Because at that point, I was the administrator at St. John's Center. And worked there with Marianne Wildermuth. Marianne ended up being the administrator after I left. And she was I always kidded her about being the oldest employee they had, but she was the first employee that St. John's had ever hired. And so she was the first employee that they had. And she really has done a fabulous job with St. John's. And then about maybe 2 years ago, she left St. John's, and she came to work with the organization I work with now, and she's running a nursing home in Sydney, Ohio, for us. So she's really done a nice job over the years. But we put together, as I say, the planning committee from St. John's ended up being kind of the steering committee for building this. And involved, I'm trying to even remember some of the people like Pete Noonan, and Todd Noonan was on that board when I first went to St. John's. And then Pete came over to that board, and Dick became part of the St. John's Mercy Board, I think it was. And we had Pete Hackett, and we had some just great board members, and a lot of great board members on that board. And they would all, whatever was necessary, they were willing to do, and jump in and back you, do whatever we had to do. But we put the plans together, and we ended up hiring John Pauley as a construction manager. And it was his job to keep track of that. He wasn't the contractor, but he was a construction manager. And we paid him to bring in all the subs and to get everything lined up and get this place built.
Who was the architect?
Well, I'm trying to remember the architect.
Out of town?
Out of St. Louis.
Oh.
Yeah, and I don't remember the name of the architect now. And as I say, we had a lot of input from them. Frankly, they probably didn't do as good a job as far as their consultation with us as we expected them. And I think between those board members and myself, we did a lot of the work that we thought that they would probably do by the time we got finished.
When did you break ground?
It seemed like it was, I'm trying to remember when we actually opened. It was in the mid-'80s, maybe in 85, something like that. And I can remember being over here, right in the midst of that. Well, first, I was over here, and I remember our kids walking all around and enjoying looking at them, dig the holes and do the foundation and all that type of thing. And then right in the middle of all of that, we had some real difficult things happen. I had a son that had really gotten killed in a burn accident. And he spent 6 weeks down at the hospital in Dayton before he finally died. And that came right in the midst of that. So, I had a little difficult time getting back and getting adjusted, but didn't have much choice. We had to keep on going.
Now, were you in on the acquisition of the land?
Yeah.
Let's have that story.
That was kind of neat. That was owned by Link, Dick Link, I believe. And this land had sat here for quite some time, and we were looking at a number of different possibilities, and this was one. And another possibility was the land out there where they just built the big Lutheran church. That was available at that time. What is it, Fifth Lutheran?
Grace.
Grace Lutheran, yeah, it was out there. So they just built that, and that land was available at that time, and that was one of the pieces of ground that was being considered. If I remember, there were like 6 different pieces of ground, but it came down to between that one and this one. And the board decided that they liked this. They liked the idea of being able to get back out of the way, have the tree line drive, and about that time, this ground had sat here for a long time, at least more than a year, maybe more years than that. And so we went to make an offer on the ground and found out that Mr. Turner had just made an offer on the ground right ahead of us.
For the whole thing?
For the whole thing, because he wanted to build this church out here.
Yeah. Now, the country club was already here?
Yes. Yes, it was. And Mr. Turner wanted to build a church, so he'd made an offer on buying the whole piece of ground. So then that put us in a bad situation here. We'd made a decision to buy this ground, and we go, and it was like only a couple days before, and he didn't realize we were after it, and we didn't realize we were after it. So I remember we had a meeting, and at the meeting was Pete Noonan and Howard Noonan and myself and Mr. Turner. And there may have been somebody else, but I can't remember who it was. But we met with him, and he said, well, the only thing I want to do, I just want space for this church. He said, so why don't we make a deal with Mr. Link that I'll take this and you guys take the rest of it. So we met with Mr. Link, and it worked out fine. So we took the rest of it, he took that ground, and they worked out very good neighbors. And, so that worked out fine. I remember Pete Noonan and I walking all over this place. You know, we got our old clothes on and our boots, and we walked all the way around this ground before there was anything back here. And it was hilly, but we had, the board members had a lot of vision.
Now, how was the cost of the ground? What was it in size, and how in the world did you finance it?
I'm thinking that it was around 50 acres, but I can't remember for sure. I don't remember the exact number of acres this year. 50-some acres, I thought. And it was included in that. We were able to get the bond issue that Mercy was offering us to be a part of that bond, so we were able to finance it in that way. Mm-hmm. The other thing which had happened is that about the last 2 or 3 years leading up to that at St. John's Center, we had had some very successful financial years, which we were having some real challenges financially up until that point. So we were able to take some of that as seed money to do some of this. So St. John's had some...
From the St. John's operation?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't understand it was locked in that much.
Yeah. Well, basically, St. John's Center and their board decided to do this. So, I mean, it was the planning committee from St. John's Center's board that actually just started doing it. Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
Oh, I'm tired, but I'm okay.
Okay. Basically, it was St. John's that decided to do this. Mm-hmm. As part of their board, and then it was decided that it would be better to break it off and have 2 separate corporations.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I got the impression that John Polly was the contractor, but that's not true.
Well, John was what they call the construction manager.
That's a different story.
Yeah. Yeah, he was hired as construction manager and subbed out basically everything. He might have had a couple things that laborers do some things, but basically it was his job to sub it all out.
Mm-hmm. But any time during the activation of the construction, did you have to stop it?
I don't think there was any stoppages that were very prolonged about anything other than just normal delays about this or that, but I don't think we had any major challenges with that.
How far along were you in the construction when you said we can't go any farther without switching ownership?
I think that we had really done that prior to actually starting construction. Because we hadn't really started it because we were concerned whether we could pull it off, and that's when Mercy kind of entered and said, look, we can do this, and if you want to make this thing go, we can offer you part of this bond issue. So that was really prior to our actually starting construction.
Well, that clears up a lot of things in my gossiping information that I got. I thought there had been a stoppage of construction somewhere part way, and that the open building was exposed to the elements.
Yeah. No, we never had that.
Good. Okay, now the construction is started. John is supervising. What are you doing?
Well, I'm still the administrator at St. John's Center.
Oh, I see.
I'm trying to run back and forth, and I was fortunately had some really good people at St. John's, including Marianne Wildermuth, who was my assistant. So between her and myself, we were running St. John's Center, and then I was over here a lot, and running back and forth and trying to coordinate with John Cawley what we were doing, who was doing what, and what the timing was, and that type of thing.
Who did the marketing of the occupancy?
We really hired two people who had done this at a number of different locations. They were from out of town. It was a husband and wife team. And we set them up in an office over at Mercy Crest, at the office building over at Mercy Crest.
Uh-huh.
And, well, I'm trying to remember their names, and I can't. But they had done this very similar type thing at probably half a dozen retirement communities. They just moved into town, and with their experience, they knew what to do and how to do it, and how to tell you to put the brochures together, and how these things are supposed to be marketed, as we were trying to learn as we were going along. One thing that I didn't learn down at Otterbein was how to market, because they just built it and everybody came. They didn't have to market.
Yeah, they had the big Methodist church behind them.
Yeah, and they had a waiting list at that time of like a 5-year waiting list of people wanting to come down there.
Wow.
Yeah, it was amazing, the number of people that wanted to come into Otterbein. But probably one of the major challenges we had when we opened up, the people didn't know what they were doing as far as marketing. We probably felt that they were a little too high pressure for what we would like to have had. And so they ended up leaving, and not on a bad note, but they did leave because I think that they sold what they thought they could sell, and they left.
Were they on the commission?
Yes, they were.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So they had slowed down some, and they weren't making the money that they needed to make. But I think probably what we found is that the market feasibility study that had been done probably wasn't as valid as what we had hoped it would be. As an example, they looked at a market that included even some of Dayton. So it's a big market, about 20-25 mile radius that they used to say that we could pull people in from there. Well, what we found out in reality was that 4 or 5 miles was about it. We got over in the Ridgewood area, we got a number of people who came in from there, and then it was pretty spotty, but we didn't pull anybody from outside of this area at all. And what really scared us, and especially when you were the guy in charge, my stomach started knotting up. We got about a third full, and it just really slowed down, and just, when somebody come in, we don't have a celebration. So we had 120 units, or 130 units, I guess, and we probably got about a third full, or maybe a little more than that, and it just really slowed down. And so we all really got concerned. And so I had run into a person by the name of Michael Starkey, who really does market feasibility work. And he was out of Cincinnati, and we had not used him before. So I called him and asked him to come up, and I said, I need some help. If you were starting from scratch, I'd like for you to do just like you do a market feasibility study for us, because we got to know where we're going to go with this thing. So he did, and he spent a lot of time at it, and he came back, and he got finished, and he was in here working, and one night at about 11 or 11:30 at night, I got a call at home, and he said, have you got some time to come over here? I said, yeah, I got time. So I come over here to Oakwood Village and met him, and we sat down there in the lobby, and he said, well, he said, I got some good news, and I got some bad news. He said, the good news is, he said, you guys have really done a nice job of marketing this place. He said, it's a great place, and he said, you've marketed it. The bad news is, I think you already got everybody. Is there anybody else out there? And what you're charging. Well, what we had done, we had set up an entry fee.
Well, who got that idea?
Well, that was from the consulting people that we'd hired from St. Louis.
Uh-huh.
So we'd set up an entry fee, and I don't remember the amounts of money, but it was a significant amount of money, and people had to pay an entry fee, and then on top of that, they had to pay the monthly fee.
I remember John Coons, who was a good friend, said that they had to pay $100,000 deposit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I don't remember exactly what those plans were, but basically that if you paid down, say it was $100,000, that every year it would go away a little bit by little bit, and after you're here 5 years, you wouldn't get anything back. That type of a situation.
Yeah.
So what we ended up doing was that we went back and reconfigured the whole thing, and although it was going to be very tight financially, which I imagine it still is, decided to do away with the entry fee. And the monthly rent really stayed pretty close to what it was before. And the reason we were able to do that is because the Mercy Health System came up with some dollars to help us do that over a period of time. Mm-hmm. And had they not been there with that financial backing, that's where something might almost stop. But it didn't, and it's a good thing we had their financial backing, because at that point, and then when we took the entry fee away, gradually it started filling up again, and we ended up filling up.
We continue to be grateful to the Mercy system for undergirding this place. I've gotten the financial reports as a member of the executive committee, and the cooperation that comes from the sisters is quite remarkable.
That's great, because I was just glad they were there when we were building, because had they not been there, we could have really had a major problem. Mm-hmm. But they gave us the financial support really to make sure that, to give us the opportunity to fill it up.
Now, how long did you stay in the operation after it opened up?
Basically, once we opened up and once we got filled up, that's when I left. And there was a couple reasons why I left. Mercy we had really put together a lot of people who knew a lot about this and nursing homes by that time. And we had really approached the Mercy Health System about maybe doing some similar things or helping other hospitals, similar to Mercy Medical Center, go out and build nursing homes and retirement communities in their system. And at first they thought it was a good idea, and then they decided, no, we don't think we want to do it. Well, we were kind of all dressed up and no place to go. Uh-huh. So it ended up that we broke away and started a company, and it's called AdCare Health Systems. And we've done much of that same type of thing. We help other people build, now a lot of it's been assisted living, and or retirement communities or whatever. Right now, we're working with Quakers down in Waynesville, Ohio, and they're building a 30-unit assisted living and attaching it to their nursing home and making some changes in their nursing home. So we then go in and help them do all that type of thing. We're managing some nursing homes for some other people. We're developing and building assisted living. Right now we run 7 nursing homes and we run 7 assisted livings. So the company that I broke off and went with, that's what we're doing.
In what different areas are these located?
The nursing homes, a lot of it started with Miami County and Upper Valley Medical Centers, which is the hospital healthcare system in Miami County. And they decided they wanted to expand into the nursing home business. And so we helped them do that. We helped them evaluate nursing homes, whether they wanted to acquire them or not. And then after we did that, they gave us the opportunity to run them for them. Mm-hmm. Because it is a much different business than hospitals, and hospitals really have a difficult time trying to get in the nursing home mindset and run them properly. Mm-hmm. So we run three nursing homes for them right now. Plus, they've got a retirement community in Tip City called Springmead. I don't know whether you've ever been by that or not. No. It's right on I-75 at Tip City, at the Tip City exit. But they've got 83 like cottage-type independent living senior living there. And then there's a 99-bed nursing home on the same campus. So they've got a retirement community there, and we help them develop that whole thing. So it's a lot like developing this, a lot of the same thing. And so we've been doing that over and over now.
Wow.
So this was a great learning experience for me. I found out what not to do.
Did you discover any particular individuals that you had to rely on primarily for help from your board that you'd like to give a commendation to?
Oh, there were so many. Frank Otway was always helpful. Pastor Kay certainly was always there whenever you needed him. Dick Matthies was a guy that was always helpful to me. Anytime I'd call him, Pete Noonan was very helpful. Pete, I started abusing Pete, his time. He started really getting upset with me because I would abuse him all the time. I said, Pete, I need you in a meeting. So he'd come trudging over, but he really did a nice job for us.
And we're using him a great deal at Wittenberg.
Oh, yeah? Oh, well, he's always been great for the community, and he's always been willing to spend time. He was on the board that when I was doing the alcohol and drug treatment program, and I was executive director there, and he was on that board, along with Dr. Ed Husenfeld, I'm sure you remember.
Yeah.
He was on the board when I was over at the Alcohol and Drug Council, and Pete was on that board. And then, so when I got to St. John's, I talked Pete into coming over and getting on that board because I knew I could always get him to do what I needed to work with me. So.
At any time in the whole procedure, was there any use of private financing, or was it all Sisters of Mercy?
It was basically all Sisters of Mercy.
Mm-hmm.
We had, from St. John's Center, had provided a lot of the seed money when we were trying to put the plans together because we were, hiring some consultants and doing feasibility studies. And, of course, my time, St. John's was paying me all the time we were trying to develop this. So St. John's Center still put a significant amount of financial input into this prior to being funded and financed through the Mercy Fund issue.
I'm sure that's something that the public doesn't realize.
Yeah, they may not, because, as I said, I think fortunately we'd had some good financial years for a couple of years before this was built, and we had those dollars that we could do that with.
Now I understand St. John's is going into Alzheimer's even to a greater extent.
I'd heard that. I don't know that because I haven't talked to anybody over there, but all I know is what I'm hearing and reading in the papers.
Mm-hmm. They're doing a great deal of rehab over there to the building. Well, this is highly interesting. I've tried to picture how this place ever got underway. And Dick Ezekiel has a pretty good concept of it. And he's going to follow up to this interview by saying what's happened since you.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Dick was at Urbana when all this was going on, if I remember right.
Mm-hmm.
And Dick was, he'd had a lot of experience with retirement communities. I can't remember exactly where, someplace on the East Coast. Dick had been involved in a retirement community out there before he even came back here.
Oh.
And so I knew that when I decided to leave, I thought, well, Dick is a perfect guy because he's got more experience than I had with this thing. And he's just a super person.
What attorney did you utilize in this procedure?
Jim Harmon.
Jim Harmon.
Jim Harmon.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and he had been our attorney at St. John's, and he just came over and started working with us here. Mm-hmm. And volunteered a tremendous amount of time.
But he couldn't charge for it.
Right.
Your relationship to Pastor Glazner, I think, is quite duplicated in a number of ways in this community, where I've run across people that just swear by him and never at him. And of course, I've known him since he just started in seminary at Wittenberg. And I knew him as a very different man with a totally 1,000% commitment to Jesus Christ.
Yes.
He's quite a remarkable guy.
Yeah, I've always thought the same thing. I'll tell you another person who was really helpful, both at St. John's and in the development of this, was a guy by the name of Jack Miller, who was also a good friend of Pastor Kay's. And Jack had been president of the board at St. John's Center for a long time. And Jack died maybe 5 years ago.
What was his business?
He was in some type of industrial business in Dayton. He had a small plant in Dayton.
Because I never knew him.
Because he was originally from Springfield, but he had apparently acquired this business in Dayton, so he moved to Dayton. And but Jack was just really a person who just spent an amazing amount of time trying to help us do all this too.
Where the fuck was I in here? Please turn the tape.